afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee meeting. I declare the meeting open. I call for attendance and note that all members are present. We have no apologies. Do we have any interest to declare in relation to items on the agenda today? No? Okay, so we'll move to agenda item 1, which is the Ipswich Central Executive Report, number 17, to 3 July 2020. Call on the relevant council officer to outline the report for us. Just state your name and title.
Greg Thomas, Project Manager, CBD Redevelopment. So, councillors, the report in front of you for the last month is basically a summary in the new format that started last month of the progress of the development. I thought I'd just give you a quick précis of that. So basically the administration building is looking great, going well. Topping out ceremony is to be held this Friday, the 24th of July. Topping out means the building's attained its maximum height from a structural perspective. So that's a big attainment, that one. The library and the civic space are going really well. The trees are in place largely now. A lot of the gardens are in place. It's looking great. And that's scheduled to be completed by October 20. The car park, some works have started down under the car park about painting and cleaning, so that will be finished in August 2020. Some works will be starting shortly outside the Eats building in Nicholas Street to improve the facade and improve customer access along Nicholas Street for when the library opens. This is a critical piece of work to ensure pedestrian safety and improve the pathway for people moving from the civic space and the library into the mall area. So, critical piece of work. And the other interesting point is that the Commonwealth Hotel, which was discussed at the last council meeting, that contract will be executed shortly and works commencing in early August with a December 2020 completion date. So regarding the retail side of the project, that's still dependent. The timing of those works is largely dependent on the execution of the lease for the key anchor tenant, which is still progressing. I can't give you a time, but I understand that it's going quite well and it's imminent. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Before we move forward, I just want to clarify a couple of dates within the executive summary. I think we might have just a couple of minor errors. So we talk about the civic space due for completion in October 2021. That should be 2020.
That's correct, yep.
Yeah. And over the page, third paragraph down, the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Retail and Commercial Property Strategy. That was...
That's that should have been the 30th of June. That's correct. Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
I just have a couple of questions. Firstly, in relation to the refurb of the existing car park.
Yep.
How are we managing the upgrades alongside, commuters that regularly use the car park?
Well, as a commuter that regularly uses the car park, it's been managed very well. Mm-hmm. So COVID-19 has heavily impacted the usage of the car park, so there's plenty of spaces to be...
Timing was perfect.
Yeah, it was actually, yes, it was perfect. So, no, Hutchinsons have managed that very well. There hasn't really been any issues that I've heard of, or you would have heard about them as overseeing that, so it's gone very well. They're basically clearing out now a lot of their scaffolding and other materials they had on site, so it's starting to look like a car park again. Okay.
And you mentioned in your summary the changes that were being made to make it easier and safer for pedestrians down Nicholas Street.
Yep.
Outside of Eats. Obviously, injury is the biggest concern. Can you just give us a bit more detail about what we will see changing down there?
So, the Eats building, which is on the western side of the mall, has an old style facade. So that facade is going to be taken down and replaced with the proposed facade as part of these works. Mm-hmm. The streetscape will be improved. At the moment, it's rough concrete, part of that, so that'll be all tiled as well. So they'll get the finished surface to access from the car park and library into the southern end of the mall.
Okay.
Yep.
And so that is the section where we have an existing long-term tenant.
I know this is further north, so near the intersection of Union Place, so where the road turns 90 degrees and heads out to Bell Street. So it's just in that vicinity there, so down further from the old cinema.
So there's no impacts to existing tenants?
No, not from these works.
Okay. Just something else I wanted to call out within the report. I notice obviously the photographs that are provided on within our weekly updates, the planting of the trees has gone in, which is quite exciting, and it's been the subject of a little bit of discussion on social media and out there within the community. The use of figs. Residents have raised concerns in the past regarding the use of figs. Obviously we have quite a few through the main street, and they can become unruly. So can you just give us a little bit of a background around those trees? Do you know, and maybe you're not in a position to answer the questions. I was wondering if you get
So I could take that on notice, but I understand, because I asked the question myself, that the tree selection, the particular type they've got, don't drop a lot of fruit and are not likely to attract bats, for example, so things like that. But we can get you more information on that in next month's report if you would like. Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions, Council Officer? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thomas. Just looking at some of the risks, looking at pages 12 and 13 of the report, so that it's essential. I'd like to talk to you about the risks that are at the extreme and high level and what's being done to mitigate it, or if we can or can't. So the first one, Ipswich Central Civic Project. So we talked about the risk of COVID-19 and monitor the impact. Could you outline what those extreme and high current residual risks are?
That would be around the supply of materials, particularly overseas sourced materials coming in.
The elevator, or that's been sorted?
No, I understand the elevator's in place. So, for example, the facades, there's still some facades coming, as I understand. I think all the tiling is here. I could be corrected, but I understand all the paving is here. But that's the sort of thing that risk is referring to.
Okay.
That the supply chain may be heavily impacted and then impact the ability of the builders to actually construct.
Through the chair, is it facade of which part of the admin building or the retail area? Which part?
The admin building.
Okay.
Yep. So they're all sourced from overseas. Yep. So a lot are here already. Some are in transit, and I understand, because I asked this question recently, there's still some being manufactured, but there's no issue with the supply chain at the moment. That supply chain.
Okay. When do we start getting very worried, Mr Thomas, if about the supply?
Well, I don't believe there's an issue to be worried at the moment, the way things are rolling out. So it's just shown there as an extreme risk about what could happen if it becomes an issue.
Okay. Next one is the cleaning and social distancing and other mitigation strategies have been implemented for the contract at the risk of the shutdown of work site, and they're both listed as extreme.
Yep, so this relates to particularly the builders, Hutchinson Builders workforce, should there be a corona outbreak amongst the staff. So they've done everything they possibly can, from, staggering lunch times, making people sit further apart in the lunchroom, all those sort of things to try and mitigate that risk.
And has that an impact on the schedule or costs?
No, there's been no talk of that. There's been no impact on the schedule.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess from the risk of project contingency being used, has project contingency being used?
Project contingency is being used.
Due to COVID or for other reasons?
Due to unforeseen issues or things which someone believes is a great idea to be implemented into the project, and that funds the actual purchase of that particular service or asset or whatever. So an example might be if there was a request for additional security cameras in the civic space that might be driven by that team, then this bucket of money would fund that. So the contingency budget is used to fund all those sorts of activities across the breadth of the...
So I understand what contingency
Yeah.
money is. I was wondering if it's being used. And
It's being used extensively.
okay.
So there'll be a report in the next committee round on the budget. So just today there were some meetings around reviewing the budget, and I think one of the papers refers to that budget review going underway, not this paper, the next one, I think.
And I asked Mr Madigan for some further details around the financials. I wasn't...
Yep.
It's my understanding too, through the Chair, Mr Thomas, that obviously contingency gets used a lot towards the end of a project. That'd be my experience as well, as things crop up. So I am keen to know how it's going.
That is true, but it's also been popular at the start and in the middle of the project as well. So, so it was a very wide scope for this project, and, perhaps some things got missed or people came up with good ideas after the fact. So it's serving its purpose.
Do you know off the top of the head, Mr Thomas, what are some of the good ideas that have come up that have utilised the contingency money?
Well, an example that I tried to use before was about the civic space cameras. So after some discussion with the City Safe team, they came up with an option to improve the security in and around the civic space, given it's going to be extremely popular with, the Ipswich residents. So part of the funds have gone towards funding. I can't remember the number of cameras, but it was quite a number of cameras, and the services that go with that.
And so that wasn't included as part of the original...
Now, there would have been some scope about cameras. It's about whether it was sufficient at the time. So I guess the people that came before us couldn't have thought of everything. I guess that's part of the issue. The contingency budget's being used for that purpose.
Right.
Let's go to page 14. We're now looking at Commonwealth Hotel, delays in appointment of contractor for Commonwealth Hotel restoration. And we've got here that current risk is high, approval to be granted for the project team to commence negotiation preferred tender. Would that not be arrested now? Because that was a point.
Yeah, so that was that's right. So that report's now several weeks
right,
old.
okay.
So
that
yes, you are correct. The negotiations with that contractor are proceeding, with the contract to be signed shortly.
Okay, so that would change back
That's
to...
correct, yep. So next month, if you look at that particular table, it'll be amended.
Okay. And to the next page, page 15, retail and entertainment. AV scope of work remains undefined. We've got here that it's currently at high risk. Do you want explaining that risk?
Okay, so I'm not particularly close to that particular point, so I could get a clarification for you next month, but I know that the team is working to get some certainty around the scope of the AV, because it's wider than just, the AV on the administration building. There's the large television screen. There's the AV projections on the corner of the Nicholas Street facade and some other initiatives as well. So it's about, so it's about clarifying the scope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Thomas.
Just through the chair, further to Councillor Doyle's comment in relation to the selection of the trees, the figs. So I've just had a few queries from the community about the, and I'm not a horticulturalist by any means, but the root system for these figs. So that's where the concern that I've heard has come from, that it damages the concrete surrounding the actual tree. So obviously, if we could just get some information about that next month.
Yeah, I've seen the voids which the tree base has gone into, and they are massive.
Right.
So yeah. Anyway, we could get you some information on how that's
Just
being
so
managed.
we can use that and inform the public. Thank you.
Mr Thomas, just the table outlining, on page 18, the extensions of time. Just wondering if they, in your view, are standard for this type of construction, or have we had greater than usual extensions of time?
No, I understand this is a normal process, and there is no impact on the actual program schedule for those extensions of time at the moment.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Okay, so just on page 17 of the summary, just below the table, we talk about the program for completion of work to the retail buildings is to be determined pursuant to confirmation of council intention to proceed. So my understanding is, anything procedural required from council in that regard was dealt with, I think, in our June.
Regarding the budget?
Well, the completion of the work. So the comment is if work is instructed to proceed in July 2020, the recommended program objectives will be completion of the streetscape in front of Eats, completion of retail fit-out to coincide with occupancy of the administration building. However, it should be noted that both these objectives are at risk if work does not commence in July 2020.
So, yeah, that's correct. So in June, council endorsed the decision by the previous interim administrator to move forward with the budget. So the issue here is that council has decided that there's a hurdle, and that is that there's an executed lease with the key anchor tenant before council decides to progress. So they've signed off on the money. So we're waiting for the key anchor tenant lease to be executed.
Okay, yep.
Prior to that commencing.
Clarification, pursuant to confirmation of council's intention to proceed. I knew that we, as a council, had confirmed that back in June, I think. So, okay, thank you for clarifying that. Any further questions on item 1? Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yes, could I ask for somebody to move this item? Thank you, Councillor Jonick, the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Now open up for discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, just curious, I know that there's been some issues with...
Sorry, thank you.
There's been discussion about access to some of the existing buildings. Just when we talked about contingency, I think it'd be really interesting when we see contingency funding with this. Maybe that could be used to deal with some of the access issues that have been occurring.
Yes, so Mr. Madigan is arranging a quote for me in relation to that proposed variation.
Sorry, folks, can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking, we're looking at, I know some areas like...
some of the private building owners on the corner of Nicholas Street, so at the top of Nicholas Street there, no longer have...
on the right-hand side. From
walking down, yes, on the right-hand side, no longer have rear access, vehicular access to the rear of their building. So that was just an oversight during construction, as it was explained to me. So Mr. Madigan is looking into ways of rectifying that and obtaining a relevant quote.
And I was suggesting maybe when we look at the contingency funding, whether that's coming from that or we'll see where Mr. Madigan gets the money from.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, Mayor, I have requested just some more information around the finances. I'm not satisfied with the level of detail that's been given to me.
So have these folks just come up with this complaint now?
No.
No, I didn't think so. It's some time, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any additional comments, discussions? Okay, we will now put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Noting we have 5 votes in the affirmative and therefore it's unanimous. The motion is carried. Now move on to item number 2, which is the Ipswich Central Retail Leasing Report, June 2020. It's a report concerning the status of the leasing program for the retail component of the Ipswich Central redevelopment. Call on the relevant council officer. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'm just not sure if we should be moving into a closed session, noting some of the lessees, the information around that is commercial in confidence, so...
Depends on what point you start to stray into that territory.
Okay, so I do have a couple of questions, but
maybe generic, you can stay in open. If you start to talk about specifics, should move into closed.
Yeah, okay. I do have a specific question, but that can wait. We might, if you've got some general comments for us.
Yeah, so largely this report is provided for your information, as part of the committee's understandings of the project and some of the complexities around issues as we move forward. I just wanted to point out in that paper, tried to clarify the difference of approach between retail and commercial leasing in terms of how incentives are dealt with. It's quite an important point, particularly as we're looking to engage retailers and also commercial tenancies down the track. And also of highlight in there is the actual impact of COVID-19 on the retail leasing area. Like, it's probably the biggest impact the project had at the moment in terms of, the reluctance of a prospective tenant to move forward, or people that we're in negotiation with to actually just on hold and look at other aspects of the business rather than this opportunity. So it's been a bit of a challenge for the leasing team. And also I just want to highlight that moving forward, council has a number of commercial office assets in the precinct, and we're looking to engage a commercial leasing agent to help us move that agenda forward. Before we know it, council staff will be in the new administration building, and we'll have some assets available to lease. So.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Thomas?
Not in open session, Matt.
Yeah, okay. So we might move to a closed session. I move that in accordance with section 2751, that we move into a closed session.
And you're just going to put the reasons.
Due to the fact that we will be discussing several of the potential lessees that have entered into heads of agreement with council, and obviously those that information is confidential.
Okay. So you just need a seconder and then move.
Thank you, Mayor Harding.
And then put it.
Does everyone confirm they're in agreement? Thank you. Unanimous.
I was going to suggest an amendment.
Okay, sure.
Knowing that you'd like some reports on key issues, I wasn't sure to put that in the resolution for it to come to you as chair. Were you after a report on
So there was
key issues and blockers?
there was a financial report that we've spoken about,
I thought you might have mentioned you were looking at.
as well as a summary of the
Do you want to put that as a council resolution or just leave it as it is? I guess is what I was asking, Chair.
Yeah, no, we might include that then, yeah.
Wait, has to be done.
What about the contingency issues? Did we need to further on that? Or we
So it was more in relation to the
Yes, I see.
leasing negotiations for
With the 6 heads of agreement.
Yeah.
Sorry, the 8 heads of agreement, yeah.
Provided to the chair of this committee. No, because of the commercial sensitivity, but to the chair of the city, of this. Yeah, to the chair.
status. Of the leasing
Leasing arrangements.
When you
Yeah.
said lease negotiations.
negotiations, yeah.
Yeah.
If that's okay with the mover and the seconder.
Councillor
Yeah.
Milligan,
Yeah.
Councillor Conzelman, do you agree? Okay. So we now put to the vote. So we'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? I note that everyone has agreed. 5 votes in the affirmative, and therefore it is unanimous. Motion is carried. Let's move to item number 3, which is the Retail Sub-Project Steering Committee Terms of Reference. This is a report concerning the proposed establishment of the Retail Sub-Project Steering Committee to support the recently established Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee in delivering the CBD project. Thank you, Mr Thomas.
So the purpose of this committee, it aligns with the fact that the project is in a transition period right now. So if you think about the last couple of years, it's been about design, it's been about building the site. So we need to move to becoming, council becoming an asset manager, a precinct operator. So part of that is quite a big portfolio of issues to discuss and manage. So the concept of this committee is that it will, on behalf of your standing committee, report up on all the issues around the operations and management and all the preparations for those activities to take place on a monthly basis. So going forward, the proposal is that you will receive a report from this committee which will cover all the retail and aligned issues. The purpose of the committee, in my opinion, basically is to provide oversight of that agenda on your behalf to manage the associated budget and reporting, and also risks associated with that portfolio as well. The concept is that we will have an independent chair of this subcommittee, and there's a proposal in there, as one of the recommendations, to appoint James Hepburn into that role formally, and for also council to adopt the terms of reference, which are somewhat based on the terms of reference for this standing committee.
Thank you, Mr Thomas. I absolutely agree with the 3 recommendations, including that Mr Hepburn be appointed as chairperson. I'm satisfied with the terms of reference, but I was hoping, do you see any value to having additional members on the subcommittee to include, now that we're getting sort of to the pointy end of business with regard to the administration building and the fit out, value add, having our heritage department as well as Mr Beckman from the Ipswich Art Gallery to provide input?
Not as members, I don't see that. Perhaps as observers or casual attendees, perhaps that
Okay.
might be appropriate. Yeah.
You have no objections to that?
No. So the focus of the committee, though, is around strategic, operational, and management issues of the precinct going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who then deals with, if it's not the subcommittee's role, whose role is it to ensure that, relevant stakeholders are included? So, for instance, Mr. Beckman from the Art Gallery is looking at doing some of the artwork within, curating some art within the foyer of our admin building.
Yeah, so I guess I would be the convener of that committee, so it would be my role to invite and involve individuals at the appropriate time.
Okay. Just wanting to shore up things to make sure we don't overlook, because I just see it as really valuable input that we have, available to us. Okay. Mayor?
Through the chair, you meant that you're the convener. I can see that Mr. James Hepburn is the independent chairperson. Would not be up to him to decide?
I think...
Are we talking about two different things?
Okay, no, I think Mr. Thomas was talking about... Are you talking about...
The operational management of the agenda of the committee, for example.
Okay. All right.
But some of those things won't have relevance to the retail.
Right.
But what goes on the foyer of our admin building would be the sort of thing that's handled through the normal administration of the CBD and would come through this committee. We're talking, the matter on the agenda is about the retail
Sub-project steering committee.
So just the retail component.
Okay.
Yeah, so we also have a technical working group of council officers that's dealing with some of those issues as well.
Okay. And what's the formal structure with that technical working group? Is there a formal structure to it, or is it something that's just ad hoc?
No, there is a formal structure, regular meetings, regular attendees, minutes. Sean Madigan chairs that meeting.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Thomas in relation to the terms of reference, the creation of the subcommittee?
I did, actually. The question of observers. Is there any reason why I couldn't be an observer? 6.4, sorry, 0.6 specifies one observer, Aaron Marchant, which of course is reasonable. Just a thought.
I don't see any reason why you couldn't attend. So we weren't trying to make the committee big. It was about being a small working group.
Yes, I'm not invoking the clause about joining in debate either. I'm just thinking that I would like to attend sometimes.
Yeah. I don't see any issue with that at all.
Thank you.
So we could even circulate the agenda
That would be...
to this
That's
committee
That would
as part of the ongoing process.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we need to include that, an amendment, to formally recognise that?
Let me just have a look at the minutes. Look at, sorry, I was...
May I suggest that we discuss this later once the speaker's been excused? But yeah.
Yes, you've got.
Okay.
I was on the wrong committee.
Any additional questions for Mr. Thomas? No. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Do we need to move from the...
Okay. Can I ask for somebody to move this item? Thank you, Mayor Harding, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. We'll now move into discussion.
This is a really, Deputy Mayor, this is a very important subcommittee. I mean, it's obviously almost like to get that leasing right for the.
Absolutely.
It's not just retail. The terms of reference cover all the commercial assets. I guess I'd be interested to know how this subcommittee is reporting to yourself as the chair of this subcommittee, and I know that Councillor Kuzma mentioned wanting to observe. I just asking. I guess leave it open for that discussion to.
So I understand there's monthly reporting.
To yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Requirement for that.
Do you think there should be more frequent?
I was just making sure that there was
no,
a
no,
formal link
there
to
is.
the chair of this committee. Yeah.
Okay, so do we need to add the detail that
Well, it's got reference to observers. This particular committee is the reason we've established this committee, and we've got some expertise in retail, is really within our organisation we don't have capacity in that space. So, it's quite a detailed piece of work. We've got an independent chair with a level of expertise in that space. So, it's dealing essentially in the commercial and confidence space. So there's no reason why councillors couldn't be involved, or the chair couldn't attend. But we just need to know that you're working at the very pointy end of commercial negotiations in that space, as opposed to I guess your normal council type operations. We've got to operate this part of it like a shopping centre owner, like a Westfield or a...
So would it be appropriate then, I guess, if the agenda does come to me and I distribute it amongst the committee members, if somebody expresses an interest in attending a particular subcommittee meeting, that...
I think you'd raise that and discuss it with the chair, I think, and then we just...
To see if it was appropriate or not, yeah. Okay. Councillor Kunzelman, are you happy with that approach?
I think so. I'll let you know.
Okay. Is there any additional discussion for this one? No? Okay, so we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, noting that we have 5 votes in the affirmative, and therefore it is unanimous. Now move to item number 4, Ipswich Central Strategic Considerations Precinct Management and Operations. The report concerning the strategic considerations being undertaken for the future management and operations of the Ipswich Central Precinct post the completion of associated construction and refurbishment. Can I call on the relevant council officer? Thank you, Mr. Hepburn. Would you state your name and role, please?
James Hepburn, and Chair of the Retail Subcommittee. Street.
Very recent.
Hasn't been adopted by full council yet.
Yes, hasn't been adopted by...
So this report essentially picks up the strategy that we're looking at as we transition from a developer, as a council developer and builder, into a place manager and essentially landlord to numerous tenants and neighbour to numerous other occupiers that sit within the Nicholas Street precinct. So we're going through a transition period whereby, as we go into sort of March leading on to July, August next year, we will be looking after very strategic parts of Ipswich City Centre.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hepburn? Mayor Harding?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Hepburn, knowing the council's by Ipswich procurement policy, how will you be managing that to ensure that any of these activities that are taking place will be having a focus on using Ipswich businesses, or if it's not here, making sure that subcontract work or some parts of the work can be subcontracted out to Ipswich businesses?
As a first step, we're looking at forming a precinct management team. So we need a team to essentially work in a typical way the shopping centre management team might operate. And that will hopefully be formed by a number of council officers. If those aren't available in the skill sets that we require, then we will be going through the procurement process to identify such roles. For example, a centre manager, somebody to sit within this precinct and keep it operational on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the other, if we perhaps look wider to some of the Ipswich business offers, I think a lot of that happens, generally speaking, within the council when we're looking at cleaning, operations, and some of the general day-to-day management of places.
I guess, Mr. Hepburn, if I look at page 75, there's a note just in the second paragraph, it acknowledged that in some cases the required skill sets are not currently available within council. Consideration is currently being given to the project delivery team having additional support to establish strategies for the management and arrangement for the CBD precinct's future operations. I guess that's where I was looking at. If we are going outside council, how are we...
I think 75 actually moves on to item 5, which is the visioning and placemaking. But there's very much an overlap between setting up an operational precinct management team and a council transitioning into managing a CBD and activating it. There's definitely some crossover between those two reports.
Okay.
Perhaps I'll let
I'll ask the next question. The next
officer pick that up.
Are there any additional questions for Mr Hepburn? No? Thank you, Mr Hepburn. Now open up for discussion.
Deputy Mayor, I guess there's no probably... Just noting that, yes, the change in role, I guess,
Yeah.
as we move from developer to landlord.
Yeah. And
Makes it real, doesn't it?
yeah, I agree, and you know we've been nervous along the way as a council being property developers. That's not something council usually
Ironic, isn't it?
undertakes, and then to move into a centre manager is just not something that we would be doing. So it's really important that we get the appropriate people in, and I think the report notes that we'll be undertaking further due diligence around costs and who that appropriate person would be. So something we can address going forward. Are there any additional questions? Did I have
Just a comment through the chair that the timely fashion of this it needs to have as much time as possible, basically, to establish someone to manage it. So the quicker we can get things through to this regard, the better, basically.
Absolutely. Agree.
You'll need a mover.
I do, yeah. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Mayor Harding. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Any further questions, comments? No, we'll now put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, noting we have 5 votes, it's therefore unanimous. Might move on to item number 5, which is the Ipswich Central Visioning and Placemaking. And this is a report concerning the visioning and placemaking undertaken by Co-Design Studios, part of the collaborative city making approach for Ipswich Central. Could I have the relevant council officer come forward? Would you state your name and role, please?
Erin Marchant, Project Manager for Ipswich Central. So this report was done back in February 2020. It was done after a consultation with the community, businesses and internal stakeholders. This report was to support the work that is already currently underway in our Ipswich Central area, which is the Nicholas Street Precinct, or Ipswich Centre Core as otherwise known. The purpose of this process was to inform the visioning and placemaking for the whole of the Ipswich Central Precinct. Just to be really clear, this is a larger precinct, the 740 hectares that has been identified through several other programs and reports which are included in the attachments. This extends up to Ipswich Girls Grammar, over to Limestone and Queen's Park, the Showgrounds, USQ, West Ipswich, North Ipswich and the private schools. This area was identified as an area that had many catalyst projects, investment and precinct priorities. The stakeholder engagement and research and data analysis that has been included in this report has also was helped to inform the next steps, and this report is to be noted and received and noted.
Thank you, Ms Marchant. Do we have any questions for Ms Marchant? No, thank you. just like to make the comment that this is another key piece of work that's just so important to the success of the redevelopment. Can I call, if there's no...
I'll move.
Call on a mover, please. Thank you, Mayor Harding, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jonick. Are there any comments, discussions?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think it's a really great report, and in particular, look at page 93, which talks about some stakeholder feedback. A quote here is, "There's so much for young children to do, babies to primary school, but I feel like there's a gap for teenagers and young adults." I've got to say that's a sentiment that certainly I feel around town, and I certainly can't wait till conflict of interest provisions we move on in this project, so we can include Councillor Fechner and Councillor Madsen being in that age group, just to get that extra points of view and from their constituents and their own personal perspectives as well. So yeah, looking forward to it.
I agree, Mayor Harding, and it's similar to the feedback I've been getting from constituents, and ideas are coming in thick and fast from residents, and a multiple theme is the request for some type of skate facility, although I'm not quite sure. I'm looking at Mr Hepburn, how that will work with our overall vision.
I think, Deputy Mayor, having those entertainment precincts for young adults is vital to keep the money in the city, and keep our people safe and close by.
Okay, if any additional comments? Okay, so we might take this to the vote. All those in favour? Noting we have 5 affirmative. Therefore is unanimous. So we now move to the final item, which is item 6 on the agenda, the Nicholas Street Redevelopment Communications and Engagement Plan. Can I call on the relevant council officer, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Lucky last for the day, it seems. Chair, Mayor Harding and councillors, Alison Grant, Acting Manager, Communications and Engagement. So this report stemmed out of a request from our last round of council and committee meetings. It's in regards to the redevelopment and the communications and engagement activities supporting that. Our focus in this report, as you'll see, has been on the period between now and December 2020, which is when that first stage will be complete. So we've certainly focused on engaging with our stakeholders and also with the wider community to ensure that the information that we're putting out is done so in a more clear and timely manner, and that we maximise all the engagement opportunities that we can across the city. So in the plan that you've got there, you'll see we've focused on quite a high-level strategic approach, including the scope, a bit of an overview of the key stakeholders, and also our proposed engagement process. And then we've given you a detailed monthly list of activities separated by communications and also engagement activity. The project has now become incredibly visible to the community, and certainly we had planned to perhaps ramp up our comms a little earlier this year. COVID had other plans, but now I think is the time that we really need to increase our visibility and the project's visibility beyond the central heart of Ipswich. So what you'll see in the plan is an increased amount of activity, not just around this precinct, but also across the city, across the southeast of Queensland, and specifically into industry publications across the country as well. We've focused the plan up to December 2020, acknowledging the work that's being done by my learned peers in regards to that placemaking strategy and also the activation plan moving forward. So we will continue to work with the broader group in regards to the redevelopment to ensure that we're supporting the new plans as they unfold there as well. So today we're just seeking your support on the proposed communications and engagement plan between now and December 2020, please.
Thank you, Ms Grant. I think you've hit on, within the plan, your plan, a lot of the key important issues, and one of the critical things is taking residents on the journey with us, and at the moment I'm being overwhelmed with inquiries and requests for information. People are both excited to see the CBD redevelopment unfold and become a place that people can go to, but also are nervously watching. I guess it is such an enormous financial spend for council, and given the history, people are looking to see some key timelines and goals, I guess, achieved. So the comms is a really critical piece, I think. We absolutely need to ramp up our comms to take our residents on the journey and inform them. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman.
Thank you for the report, Ms. Grant.
Thank you.
Will there be only one event between now and the end of the year?
No, look, at the moment, we're certainly focused on supporting the activation plan, and we will work with the broader team on that, Councillor. At the moment, we're being very cautious within the COVID environment that we're into in not to overpromise on that front. What we do know has worked very well for our traders, and it was the first time we suggested doing this last year, was a Christmas VIP event, which particularly during that time, was incredible for their sales. So we are certainly open, to opportunities between now and December. My hope, and talking with Erin and the broader working group there, is that obviously we'll be able to have some significant event activity that our team will provide substantial support to for the opening itself. But I guess that we'll be working around our COVID-19 activation plans there.
Some other report that I read, and I can't remember which one now, particularly emphasised events as being so important to...
Oh, absolutely, and you only needed to look at the success that we had at the food truck event recently, and also we were blown away. And I really do believe that our city is looking for great reasons to re-engage with its heart, and we certainly want to give them those opportunities to do so. It's just finalising that that placemaking and activation strategy, and also make sure we're in alignment with the COVID-19 restrictions.
Thank you.
So just through the chair, can I just get a little bit of clarification in relation to the stakeholder graph? Down the bottom, right at the end, it said general...
Sorry, what page are you on, Councillor Johnny?
I'm on page 217. Mm-hmm. So right at the end, it's got general community, and their level of interest is medium, but their level of impact is low.
Yeah, sorry, I will actually review that for you, Councillor. I think that's actually been a typo, because you would certainly say level of impact in that respect is high. Yes, so my apologies for that one. And certainly, getting that message out to the broader community is our absolute priority.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Through the chair, I also noticed in the same graph that stakeholder identified as state local members for Ipswich, Ipswich West and Bundamba. There's also the Springfield Chamber of Commerce, the state member for that seat, isn't it?
Therese Mullins.
Yeah, another oversight. I'll make sure that that's updated, Councillor. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, through you.
Yes.
I was looking through it as well. We also have the federal member of Blair as low and low. I actually would put that, I think, medium and medium. Mm-hmm. One, because we will need the federal government's assistance in securing funding for bridges and other things for activation, but also he does work extensively throughout the Somerset as well, and we're trying to attract clients everywhere. So
absolutely happy to change that.
That'd be good too.
And through the chair, just the Springfield Chamber of Commerce, its level of interest is medium, but impact is low, and I think that's something that we need to focus on, because we could really pull a lot of interest from that side of our city.
And certainly when you look at the plan, Council, where we've got billboards and bus shelter, for us that's really about spreading that message outside of this area. So yeah, agreed.
Right, so we're all aware.
Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ms Grant, coming to placemaking, I know that you're probably working with Ms Marchant on that and so on. Again, I'm going to come back to Buy Ipswich. Without a doubt, the food trucks at Christmas time was a massive hit. Probably the only and I know that the retailers were exceedingly happy with sales that night and that afternoon. Probably the only negative was the lack of local food vendors in the trucks. I guess want to make sure that the Chambers of Commerce are approached, but also that local businesses are approached. I guess what's your plan there to make sure there's many Ipswich vendors are approached?
Or at least given the opportunity, even if they don't
They say no,
take
they
it
say
up.
no, but what's...
And you're certainly, we were open to the Ipswich vendors, but as I'm sure you're aware, we used an external company from a cost perspective to organise that. My understanding is that, the policy is being reviewed in that regards to, and we'll make sure that we've got a process in place to ensure that they're included each and every time. Certainly wasn't, it wasn't an intention to leave anybody out. And I do know that there were discussions held with a number of local vendors who did want to participate and could or couldn't, for particular reasons. But following up on our event, our feedback and discussions with the organisers were very clear that we need to be, more open in that respect. That's if we use that group again.
Thank you. And again, through the chair, if we just keep proper records and we have consulted with local, because if something happens down the track, it kind of helps us when we're having discussions with the local community to
Absolutely.
say, yes, you were, or you weren't, or if there was a gap, and it allows us to improve as we move on.
Absolutely, Mayor.
Thanks, Ms Grant.
Any other questions, Councillor Kunzelman?
Mayor, did you want, through you, Chair, did you want to include the price in this one? 127,000.
Oh, what about you?
Sorry,
I'd just like to have the motion to include the projected price, which is on the last page of 127,250. That's right, isn't it?
It is.
That's the total.
That's our recommended total for what, as you can see, is a very comprehensive campaign between now and December.
I'll move that amendment.
okay, thank you. And could I have a seconder?
Oh, yes.
250.
Thank you, Councillor.
Not bad value for money.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think Councillor Johnny seconded that, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. Open for discussion? Open for further discussion? No? We'll take it to the vote. All those in favour? Noting all 5 affirmative. The matter is therefore unanimous. And with no further items on the agenda, this meeting is closed.
Done.
Thank you.
Big day.